Donald Trump going back today to his base-stoking playbook after realizing the economy may no longer be the saving grace he thought it might be for his re-election campaign. Today, reviving a move from the last couple of weeks, attacking members of Congress known as the Squad. Trump tweeting this morning, Israel would show great weakness if it let the first two Muslim members of U.S. Congress, Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, into this country. The New York Times writing how Trump's actions crossed yet another line. Quote, no matter how virulent their differences at home, presidents have traditionally not enlisted the help of overseas allies to take action against domestic political adversaries. But Mr. Trump has demonstrated time and again over the last 2.5 years he sees little need to observe the norms that have governed previous occupants of the White House, dismissing them either as antiquated or irrelevant if he recognized their existence at all. To Mr. Trump, politics is a contact sport with few limits, and Ms. Omar and Ms. Tlaib have become two of his favorite targets. Hours after his tweet, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed the country would, in fact, bar the Congresswoman from visiting, a move that has sparked outcry from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Joining the conversation, White House correspondent for the New York Times, Annie Carney. The great panel is back. So, Annie, let's start there. The president's going to New Hampshire. It's a state, I think it was the closest state that he lost in the last election. But he has seen time and again that for his base, these kinds of attacks, branding women like the two female Muslim members of Congress as the face of the Democratic Party.
That's right. And this attack actually was a little more shocking than usual for a president who it's hard to be shocked by anymore in terms of trying to dictate the actions of foreign leaders to take against his own political enemies at home. He has the old, very antiquated idea that politics stops at the water's edge has clearly been out of fashion since Trump took office. We've seen him go abroad and play out his fights with political adversaries on foreign soil. For instance, in Tokyo, where he was wined and dined by Abe, the prime minister, his best friend on the international stage. He spent most of the trip attacking Joe Biden. This, however, is a more escalated version of that ending of that tradition, where he sits at home and commands a leader of another country to take an action against his adversaries.
And Rick
here.
Stengel, not just the leader of another country, but the leader of one democracy, telling the leader of another democracy that two women who were legitimately elected by the people in their district should not be allowed to go to Israel.
Yes, Chris, you put it exactly right. It's appalling. The head of the U.S. government is telling a foreign head of state to not accept two duly elected members of Congress over which he presides. It's appalling. And the second appalling part of it is that Israel listened to it. Israel bills itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, a democracy that protects freedom of speech, freedom of representation, all of the freedoms that we prize here. And what does Netanyahu do? He does not allow these two critics to come into his own country, nullifying this idea of him as a democracy. And the other thing, it also shows weakness, right? A strong leader and a strong government allows dissent and allows criticism. A weak leader and a weak country doesn't allow it, and that's what Netanyahu did.
Yeah. Many organizations, AIPAC and others, pro-Israeli organizations have said, we don't like what these two women have said, but they ought to be able, AB, to go to Israel and see for themselves.
Right. And even the Democrats in the House who are Jewish and who've taken great offense at the things that some of these two members have said in particular, have also expressed solidarity with them being legislators from a separate and co-equal branch of government in the U.S. who should be invited into the democracy of an allied government. The president does not see the Congress as a separate and co-equal branch of government, as we know. This is of a piece. He has said nothing about solidarity with the protesters in Hong Kong. I have not heard from enough Republicans, except for Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who put out tweets. But it's been pretty quiet over at the Trump administration about whether or not we stand with the protesters in Hong Kong for their democratic rights and their human rights. This is the president's been tweeting today that he thought that if President Xi just met with the protesters, everything would end up in a really nice hug. This is beyond belief, but actually, save for Marco Rubio, I have not heard a lot of Republicans talking out today about him pressuring Israel to not to deny them entry into Israel. So I actually think more Republicans need to step up.
Aaron Blake, you're nodding
this.
as AB's saying this.
Yeah, the Rubio tweet I thought was interesting. He basically made the case that I don't agree with anything these women say about Israel, but essentially by barring them from entering the country of Israel, the Israeli government and I guess by extension President Trump were giving them exactly what they wanted, which was to be turned into, kind of the outcast, somebody whose views are so dangerous that you can't even allow them into your nation. What does that do for their platform? It really raises them up in certain ways. And so, it looks, just judging by the way this all came together, where Israel initially was going to admit them, and then the president tweeted what he did this morning, he kind of pushed them into a little bit of a corner where they could either do what the president of the United States said, or they could go against him. And I'm not sure that necessarily was the right call. Now, the president might like this as an electoral strategy, but on a policy level, as far as what Israel is trying to accomplish and what many in the Republican Party want to accomplish with the Israel policy, I'm not sure that it was terribly productive.
Well, there's an Israeli journalist who covers Washington for Haaretz, which is a major newspaper in Israel, who wrote, Israeli officials wanted the media to focus on the 41 supportive Democratic members of Congress who visited Israel last week, and less on Omar Tlaib. But Trump wants the media to focus entirely on Omar and Tlaib because it's good for him politically.
Trump is weak and ineffective as a president. He has nothing else to pull from. So what he does is turns to women of color, people of color, communities of color, which he has dehumanized, vilified repeatedly from the moment, again, he descended that golden escalator in 2015, and this is his play. He has nothing else. He has nothing that he can lift up, that he can say, I did this for the American public. I have increased wages. I have done X, Y, and Z for farmers. He hasn't done anything. And so this is what he turns to.
And the other thing he turns to, and we've mentioned it, he consistently does not stop politics, domestic politics at the water's edge. He attacks from abroad. Let's just remind folks, and this is, by the way, all of the sound I'm about to play you is from this year. Take a listen.
Well, Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that. I think he's been a not very good mayor, from what I understand. He's done a poor job. Crime is up, a lot of problems. He should be positive, not negative. He's a negative force, not a positive force. I think she's a disgrace. I actually don't think she's a talented person. I've tried to be nice to her because I would have liked to have gotten some deals done. She's incapable of doing deals. She's a nasty, vindictive, horrible person.
And fast forward to last week, Annie, when a reporter went to the White House and said, we're hearing that pressure is being put on Bibi Netanyahu to not allow these women to come to Israel. It was categorically denied, and yet we see what happens today.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to all the other groups that he goes after, we're looking at it. Another factor is this, where it makes it very impossible to work for him or speak for him. Stephanie Grisham, the new press secretary, said categorically not true when Axios reported that he was saying he wanted them barred from doing this trip, and she called it fake news. And then he just tweets it out. In addition, his own ambassador to Israel, Dermer, had said we intend to let them in. So he puts his aides and the people who are hired to further his agenda in a very awkward place and makes them look like they are flat out lying or simply don't know.
Annie Carney, thank you for spending time with us. The rest of our panel, on that happy note, is going to stay with us because after